Hi everybody, this is Toffee bringing you my Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia 100% growth except Python's defense LTC. This will be a full recruitment all fixed encounters playthrough that will hack weapon accuracy and crit rates to more conveniently rig for many unreliable turn saves. I didn't record the prologue, but it's a simple 2-turn that just requires rigging to land hits and it isn't counted in the overall turn count. Shadows of Valentia is interesting as an LTC game because almost every map is a route. I've recorded the off-map segments such as exploring villages and dungeons and will include them in the videos unless they're purely grinding for money. Act 1 begins in Ram village with our protagonist Alm recruiting his buddies to sign up for the Deliverance. Pretty much all of the Ram villagers will have parts to play in this playthrough. Alm is outlawed and is sort of a Jagan for the first couple of maps alongside Lucas. He won't do too much until Act 4 when he gets to promote and gains access to bows, making him a valuable combat unit for several Act 4 clears and in Act 5. Since SOV promotions are to class basis, there isn't much point of feeding him EXP before then. Lucas is the least useful of our starting squad, helping chip enemies on one map before he permanently will become a warm body for trading items around. Cliff starts as a level 1 villager with his high base resistance and luck stats being noteworthy. Despite his poor base speed, with help of rigged crits, we will pump a lot of EXP into him since he will be the primary archer on Alm's route. Gray starts as a level 5 villager with his high attack stat being his notable selling point. He can promote without any investment, but we will feed him a couple of levels before then to get the ball rolling since he'll be the secondary archer. Faye starts at level 1 and she'll be trained to handle both our magical combat needs and be our rescue user. Tobin starts at level 2 and he's the utility guy. We'll take advantage of end of map bonus XP payout and ship to get him the level he needs to promote to Cavalier, so he can eventually become our first swap user. We activate a couple of quests in Ram Village. One of them is to trade a ram wine for a blue cheese, which we won't bother with, while the other is to kill 20 brigands in a Thieves shrine for a Fruit of Life, a plus 2 HP item, which we surprisingly will do even though this is an LTC, though Alm won't collect the reward. We reorder our units since we don't get access to preparations just yet, and it's time for Ram Woods. This map is the only turn we lose to a DLC run in all of Act 1, and it's because there are a couple of brigands we can't get a range of on turn 1 with our base movement stats. The strategy is basically a shuffle of Chungler's clear, with the primary targets for EXP being Cliff and Faye. Alm, Lucas, and Grey will just help set up kills for them, while Tobin blocks off the path to the heal tile. Something to bring up is that most human enemies in FE15 have heal AI, where they'll become non-aggressive when below 50% HP and instead seek out a healing tile. This means we need to manage damage carefully on maps where we can't just block off heal tiles, which will be the majority of them. Right now, the Brigand's axes have been set to have significantly reduced accuracy, since we do need a few dodges to make the clear work. We suspend here for the first instance of something that you'll see a lot of in this run, modifying weapon stats. In the first part of this clear, we didn't want anyone to land any critical hits, but on turn 2 enemy phase, we want Cliff to kill every enemy that goes for him with a crit, since at base he does not have the speed to double the brigands. The reason Cliff didn't ship that brigand for extra EXP is that he's occupying a tile somebody else who moves ahead of him in the movement order needs freed up to die to Cliff. That will conclude Ram Woods in 2 turns. We still don't have access to prep, so it's reordering time again. Provisions in SOV can heal a little HP and restore fatigue in dungeons. We don't use them in the early game because we have the power of rigging, and past that we want to outfit our primary combat units with actual weapons instead. The fatigue restoration effect comes into play exactly once in this run, late in Act 5. As such, they are simply just sellables as far as we're concerned, although given the ability to tediously grind for money, they're not uniquely useful in that regard. Now it's time for Fleecer's Forest. This map is our introduction to archers. They're difficult to counter for most units because of their extended range, which is one of the reasons why our best combat units have to be from that class line in the long run. Cliff starts by killing him before we suspend to set swords back to no longer always critting. He can now promote, though since we have some room before we actually reach a Miller statue, we'll pump more EXP into him. Alm is basically the only unit who can get in range of the boss within 2 turns. Faye's damage output is going to seem abysmal, but once she levels up, she can double these brigands. We suspend again to switch swords back to always critting. The exact movements I make here are to ensure that the enemies die to the exact player units I want them to for the sake of the EXP distribution I'm going for. Tobin, sadly, does not get to fight on this map either. And Lucas is sitting this one out as well. Alm kills the boss, which is a bit of a waste of EXP, but oh well. Faye manages to level up off of this kill, which gives her the extra firepower to kill the other brigand, completing the map in 2 turns. With the end of chapter bonus EXP, Faye is going to end with just being 1 point short of promotion. This is our first dungeon, and we'll be spending more time here than you might think if you're unfamiliar with the meta for this game. Dungeons in this game have enemies roaming about we can fight, and treasure to find, and LTCs need to sneak around enemies as much as possible, which leads to them affectionately being dubbed Metal Gear Emblem. Dungeons also have Miller statues to actually promote our units. Dungeons are also sources of infinite money in theory due to the ability to cut grass. Our first visit to Thieves Shrine is to pick up an iron sword behind some boxes so we walk away from the enemies. Nice attracts nearby ones, so after that we rush for the chest and evacuate as soon as we get the sword. The iron sword is set to have 100 crit immediately since we'll be putting it to use shortly. Our second visit has us head straight for the back to rescue Silk from the Brigand Boss. Something that I mentioned earlier is that this LTC is 100% growth except for Python's defense. This is because Python, who is a unit who'll join later in this run, has a defense anti-benchmark, which I'll talk about more later. This is one of SOV's rare kill boss maps, and because the boss moves early in the movement order, all we can do is feed the boss kill to Cliff so he just barely hits level 5. A couple of things to note is that the Ram Villager boys do not have resistance growths, and that bonus EXP cannot give you a level up. So Faye will not hit level 3 just yet. Unlike GBA, being attacked by enemies without countering does not give EXP, so we couldn't have gotten the archer to go for her to get around that problem. We recruit Silk, one of the most important units on Alm's route. She starts as a weak level 1 cleric who can only attack with the inaccurate Nosferatu and heal. But at level 7, she learns Warp, which dramatically alters the face of the run. So dramatically that in fact the optimal LTC strategy is going to be to stop and grind her up to learn Warp in Thieves Shrine. She also brings us Miller's Turnwheel, which will be very useful for a number of things. At the back of the shrine are a couple of linked stat bells, with one giving speed and the other HP. Speed is by far the more useful one, what with SOV having a doubling threshold of 1, and while a couple of points of speed would make it much easier to train Silk, with some very precise moves and the power of luck, we can avoid giving her any. We promote Cliff to Archer. Grey could promote too, but we have some time, so we want to feed him some extra EXP to fix his stats. Promotion switches Cliff over to using bows, and he learns bow range plus 1. Since he already has overshot Archer's class bases, he only gains 1 point of HP. And now, it's time for Silk's grind to start. The most efficient way to train her is to lure all three brigands in Thief Shrine into chasing you and getting ambushed by one of them while the other two are still engaged and a bit to arm's left. This will cause them to spawn in such a way that the fight can be one-turned while letting some of our units gain ship EXP and all of the kills going to Silk. On the subject of Python's defense, I wasn't aware of Python's defense anti-benchmark while I did the run, so you'll still see him get perfect defense level ups, and I just kind of hack around the issue on the late game map where he has the anti-benchmark by having his weapon give him a negative defense modifier. But as you'll see, it should still slot cleanly into a run. Right now, Nosferatu is configured to have perfect hit and crit, and yet Silk at base couldn't even one-shot that Brigand. Right now, Silk speed ties with the level 1 Brigands and is a point shot of one-shotting them with a crit, while she actually gets doubled by the level 3 ones and needs 2 level ups to one-shot them. As such, we focus on chipping the first few enemies who will move in the movement order so that she can level up in time to kill all of them, and we make sure to chip all 3 of the level 3 Brigands down so that they do not get any funny ideas about moving ahead in the movement order in order to attack Silk. Faye hits level 3 and now she's ready for promotion. The reason we needed an archer ASAP is so that we could chip that level 3 brigand, which requires 3 range. The only long term stat of Alms that promotion won't raise is resistance, so the rest of his stat gains are completely irrelevant at present. Kill gets Silk her first level up, and now she can handle level 1 brigands unassisted. And with that second level up, she can now kill the level 3 ones as well, digging her out of the hole she started in. Silk actually gets fatigued from that intense combat session, but we're gonna leave and re-enter. After promoting Faye anyway, which resets the fatigue on all of our units. Faye promotes to Cleric, and she'll begin her real training regime in earnest. She needs to learn Rescue by 3-1, which seems far off, but Act 2 doesn't feature Alms Party, so it's really right after Act 1. Most LTCs train up Tobin as a mage, but Faye will handle those duties in this run. The second round of grinding for Silk uses the same Brigand setup, but is much simpler thanks to her level ups. She has very poor base defense, so we can still afford to give a lot of our units chip EXP this time around without worrying about the Brigands redirecting. Nosferatu is initially set to not crit so that Faye could get that bit of chip EXP. But we're obviously going to have to suspend to set it back to murder all of the brigands. Tobin sneaks to level 3 there, which is the reason why we used Cliff as the primary archer and Tobin was relegated to just being the flunky unit because it's quite easy to sneak Tobin a single level just off of all this chip, but if we wanted Cliff to be the flunky unit, then we'd actually have to still figure out a way to feed him one level without interfering with the other EXP distribution that we need to perform. This patch just simplifies things. It would have been possible to get Lucas to double miss Brigand here just to get him to level 3, but he's already become irrelevant as a combat unit, so I didn't really bother. I mentioned dungeons being sources of infinite money. While it might appear that you would not be able to farm items in the main areas of dungeons just because of all the enemy units nearby, first of all, we're gonna see some dungeons later on that give us access to pots and barrels in areas with no enemies, and also pretty much every area with stat boosting wells also has grass which can be cut for money. So we could, in principle, very tediously grind up to max money anytime we want. Silk hits level 6 from this fight, meaning we can divert some kills next time to Grey and Faye. Tobin promotes to Cavalier, and it's a good thing we got that out of the way because Silk is now buff enough that enemies will actually choose to target other units, especially with the perfect hit and crit on Nosferatu. Enemies do seem to take that into account, which violates the theoretically possible nature of this run, but most of the time we will still have setups to feed our clerics the EXP they need, and it usually is acting against our interest instead of for it anyway. I eventually end up giving Grey a speed well, and I could have just done it during the grind to save some time later. The final round of Silk's grind is a little different. Because we want to split up the kills, we actually will attack one of the brigands in the dungeon ourselves this time, so our units start further up. Something else I should mention before I forget is that there is a approximately 10% chance, I think, that a super enemy could spawn in Thieves Shrine. So after we finish killing the brigands, usually like while I'm destroying all the boxes for items, I make sure to keep an eye out for that enemy so I can just evacuate if they were to show up. Thankfully, they didn't. Silk needs one round of chip along with 4 kills, and Grey needs a chip plus 2 kills. So Faye gets 3 kills on this map, which will let her get her first level up as a cleric. We do need to suspend to switch Nosferatu and the Iron Sword's stats for this. Right now, the Brigands would prioritize Cliff over Silk, though Faye is still weak enough that they will prioritize Faye over Cliff if both of them are in range. So we take advantage of all of this to feed EXP exactly to the units we want to give it to. And the Brigand from the right, who attacks Faye, exactly gets her the level, which will cause the other 2 brigands to prioritize Grey instead. Actually, I misspoke. It's the positioning that makes sure that the other 2 brigands cannot attack Faye, forcing them to go for Grey. My bad. Silk hits level 7, learning Warp, currently packing 7 range, and Grey will hit level 7. That's some pretty good EXP management on all of our growth units, if I do say so myself. Green's growth stats are actually mostly identical to Cliff. Cliff just has a small head start EXP wise from promoting earlier. However, because we need our first sniper by a certain point, we will initially focus our investment into Cliff, and Grey will take a bit of a backseat. Archer's class bases really aren't that great, which is why Grey 2 only gains a point of HP. We go back to Ram Village to pick up a couple of items we missed earlier and conclude the grind at 3 turns. Ram Valley is our first map with access to warp, and we're immediately going to see how it sharply focuses the combat onto fewer units. Most of the enemies are on the right, with a lone leather shield mercenary on the top left part of the map. This precludes the possibility of one-turning this map with just a single warper. Although, given Silk's warp range, it's not like our warp target could actually get to all the enemies on the right on turn 1. A difference between SOV and GBA FE is that warp range is calculated from the location of the warp user rather than the warp target. Cliff will start pulling his weight as our primary archer by getting warped forward to get closer to the action, handling a group of 4 enemies on turn 1. His bow starts off with perfect hit and crit, and as a side effect, the enemy archer will crit him, even though that normally would not be possible, since he uses the same default bow. Thankfully, Cliff is strong enough to take it like a champ. Turn 2 sees the first instance of one of the turn wheel's major uses in this run, retroactive weapon edits. While suspending and editing weapons on player face is simple enough to understand, sometimes in the early game we want our units to not kill specific enemies for the sake of EXP or combat art EXP distribution. Since we usually need weapons to have maxed hit and crit to actually kill things, what we do is suspend, edit the weapon stats down, and then load the bookmark and turn wheel back to the round of combat we want to apply the chain starting from, and the rest of the enemy phase will play out with the edited weapon stats. In this particular case, we also need to use our turn wheels for a second purpose. We need the final Brigand, who we tuned Cliff to spare, to attack Cliff from the right to allow us to do what we want to on turn 2. You might notice Tobin charged forward for seemingly no reason, and that Faye has an orange despite us dumping our other provisions in convoy. On turn 2, Silk warps Faye, who has just enough magic thanks to leveling up during the grind to one-shot the mercenary with Nosferatu, and she convoy warps the leather shield he drops immediately. The leather shield grants plus 3 defense, but importantly for us, 5 rounds of combat with a teacher unit, the swap skill. We will hand it off to Tobin right away so that he can get his first point from chipping the Brigand. We wanted the Brigand to attack Cliff from the right, so Tobin could attack him from below, and then Cliff could block Tobin off from the other enemies with his position while killing the Brigand. Yet another use of turn wheels is their limited ability to reroll the RNG for unfavorable combat outcomes. For example, we didn't want Tobin to actually kill the Brigand because Tobin is not a relevant EXP target. We'd rather that kill go to Cliff. We suspend to set the default bow back up to perfect hit and crit, before letting Cliff clean up the rest of the map, completing it in 2 turns. Grey sadly could not get to fight anything, but Cliff will end this map already more than halfway to promotion. Time for the epic battle of the southern outpost. All of our enemies are clustered at the top of the map in three different chambers, and it's supposed to introduce us to floor tiles, which grant 20 avoid. However, we can just edit our bows to have perfect hit to get around that. Actual bows have one more range over the default bow, so Cliff picks off the steel bow archer immediately, since he needs to be killed on player phase. Getting access to a real bow means that we can stop setting the default bow to have perfect hit and crit all the time, which will let our units not have to get crit unnecessarily by enemy archers as much. We initially have the steel bow retain its usual crappy hit rate because we need Cliff to spare the first enemy who will attack him on enemy phase. Much like the last map, this is once again to let Tobin get some swap EXP. We suspend to retroactively edit the steel bow to kill all the soldiers Cliff fights. Gray will take out the soldier in the left chamber since he stays put and he can ping him from 3 range. Something I realized in hindsight is that I could have gotten Cliff a little extra chip damage on the previous map if I had gotten Tobin to just double miss the Brigand, which in SOV would translate to extra EXP, allowing Cliff to hit level 7 after this map instead of 6.99. But it doesn't really matter in the long run. Soldiers are the predecessor to armor knights, so they are quite bulky, which we're going to see a lot of soldiers in Act 1 die requiring double crits from archers. And the same kind of goes for the cavaliers we're going to run into on the later maps in Act 1 as well, to be honest. Faye gets warped to kill the last soldier since she's our other EXP target, and that completes the map in 2 turns. We raid the southern outpost to pick up the gear the enemies left lying around. The most consequential item, funnily enough, is actually the rusted shield, to let Faye weigh herself down to help get prioritized by enemies. I don't even bother forging it into a steel shield later, since the steel shield does not give any useful combat arts, unlike the leather shield, which gives swap, and the iron shield, which we'll see later, which teaches shove. Pretty much everything else we pick up is just selling fodder for later. We also recruit Claire, the only flyer on Almshroud. While my rigged LTCs have a tradition of training up early game flyers, SOV is an exception. Warp and Rescue make flight just not that relevant, and Claire's base stats are really bad for actually killing things, though she can usually take a hit since she doesn't get double and has a good resistance base. Instead, Claire will be our second swap bot after Tobin, since much like him, she can use her high movement to actually get to enemies to face enough leather shield combat. We go back to Thieves Shrine to give Gray a speed well, since he needs an extra point of speed to double the Cavaliers on the next map. Something to keep in mind is because we're primarily training high movement units to be our swap bots, they can also use lances, which is gonna come in handy a little later in the playthrough in a very fun way. Time for the very memorably named South Zofia 1. Since Cliff is just about ready to promote, we can ease off in training him and instead start thinking about Grey and Fae. This map is mostly the Fae show, with Grey just cleaning up a couple of Cavaliers. Nosferatu starts off without perfect hit and crit because we want Fae to get chip EXP off of the boss. She's going to be our warp target on turn 1 so she can actually get up in the face of all of the enemies. Putting Claire in range of an archer seems silly, but the default bow does not do effective damage, and we want to bait him down for next turn anyway. Tobin rushes forward to get the last 3 rounds of combat he needs to hit swap, which will free up the leather shield for Claire to start using when I don't need him on swap duty. Everybody else just moves forward. Faye is holding the leather shield to make her a more appealing target for the enemies, which is probably more significant on turn 2. We suspend to retroactively edit Nosferatu to crit kill the regular soldiers who Faye fights on turn 1 enemy phase. Our turn wheels are pulling double duty on this map since we need the soldiers who attack Tobin to attack from specific spots to ensure that 3 of them engage him on this enemy phase. Tobin immediately put swap to use, though I think I could have achieved all of the objectives that I wanted to on this map without needing her to actually use swap. Lucas shows off the primary job our filler units will have in this run, helping trade items around. It wasn't really necessary here because it's just for a flex, but you'll see a lot of trade tricks in this run. Silk warps Grey to handle the Cavaliers on turn 2 while ending turn in range of one of the soldiers. The reason we want Silk to end turn in range of a soldier is because we actually want her to gain 1 extra level up, which combined with some attack wells we're going to gain access to soon, will let her squeeze out an extra point of warp range, which we're going to need starting with the final map of Act 1. Cliff gets the last bit of chip EXP he needs to hit level 7, and he's now ready to promote. I looked really hard into the possibility of squeezing out a round of swap combat on Claire on this map without affecting EXP distribution, but I just couldn't make it work no matter what I tried. Instead, I trade the leather shield over to Faye so she learns swap on this map. It's completely irrelevant. Faye is never going to have the time to use swap before she learns rescue, which completely outclasses it. We suspend to edit the default bow to perfect hit and crit for Gray's sake. He's just short of one-shotting with the steel bow, and it weighs him down too much to double the Cavaliers. Instead, he will barely kill them with double crits. Even though Faye is carrying the leather shield, Cliff's superior defense ensures that the enemies will continue to dogpile onto her. Keep an eye on Faye's defense stat though. It's gonna be relevant for a late game clear in a rather amusing way. Let's just say there's a reason this playthrough has to be a 100% growth except Python's defense growth LTC, and it's to do with Faye's defense stat. Faye learns Physic, which will make it easier to let her gain healing EXP every turn, which will actually matter since she's on a very tight window EXP wise. That concludes South Zofia 1 in 2 turns. We make another pilgrimage to Thieves Shrine, this time to promote Cliff. The bonus EXP from the previous map only actually applied to Alm, Lucas, and Claire because of a glitch related to the end of chapter cutscene playing out on the map. Which is why we didn't care too much about the fact that Cliff promoted a map late. He couldn't have gotten that bonus EXP anyway. As a sniper, Cliff gains an extra point of movement as well as bow range plus 2. This means Cliff can have 1 to 5 range with a non-default bow. Which goes to illustrate why bow users are the best combat units in this game, at least on Almstroud. South Sophia too is a giant map, so large that we're forced to take 3 turns since we need to wait for a cavalry squad in the top left part of the map to actually reach us. This lets us start training Claire towards learning Swap, and she'll end the map just 1 point short of learning it. And right there is an example of Physic helping Faye pick up more EXP. Cliff is not going to frontline on this map because he has some leeway with his training regiment, letting us once again focus kills into Faye and Grey, with Silk taking 1. Claire got 1 crit on that Cavalier, and she's going to get another one, which is going to be really annoying, which is why I end up turn wheeling to anti-rig the play to face crit. I wish I could train Alm up to learn Swap as well, since he spends a lot of Act 1 and Act 3 not really doing much, but I couldn't make it work. Clef wants to only hit once with the steel bow because he's only taking chip EXP. This is Alm's last level before he promotes. I could probably have had Silk warp Claire a little further forward to get her an extra round of combat, which would have let Claire hit Swap right on this map. But the trade off would have been losing the healing EXP on Silk. Clef could get some chip on this turn 3 player phase as well. I just didn't bother because I had some issues rigging it. Claire and head off to safety to make sure that the Cavaliers will, well, the one Cavalier who remains will go for Silk on this enemy phase. That's right, it took this many chapters for Faye to reach a point where she could, in theory, kill an enemy cleanly by just doubling them. Though, of course, Nosferatu's 60 hit would have made that a pain in a conventional playthrough. Gray gets walked to deal with the upper squad. With the kill he takes on player face, he gains a level up, which lets him just barely double and one round the boss with double crits, another place where the speed belt on him comes in handy. The remaining South Cavalier will die to Silk, getting her to 15 magic right on time, and Grey will crit kill the remaining Cavaliers to complete the map in 3 turns. Time for our second dungeon, the Deliverance HQ. We initially just run to the end because it's more convenient to scavenge the treasure on the way back. Moving forward, we will pretty much always need to sneak past enemies in dungeons outside of a few forced encounters. There are a number of rooms in this dungeon that we don't go into because they only either hold enemies which we can't afford to fight in an LTC, or they have breakable barrels and boxes, which we don't really want to bother with, especially given that breaking them would probably attract some of the enemies wandering the dungeon. We recruit Clive and Forsyth, two filler units who will only help trade items around. At the back of HQ, we get access to linked attack and defense wells, and we'll feed Silk all three attack wells so she can hit 18 magic or 9 warp range. This will pretty much be the last relevant attack gain she gains for the rest of the run, though 9 won't be the maximal warp range we have access to. On the way back out, we open the locked door to enable easy backtracking and running through the place for later, and we pick up the iron bow and a silver purse before evacuating out. We head back in to recruit the titular Python. He's too cool for us right now, so he'll give our other growth units some time to build up a lead before he shows off his true might. In all seriousness, his bases are pretty bad, and we don't have room to train him during most of Act 3, since we need to focus on training Cliff and Grey to bow knights before the final map of Act 3. However, we actually need another archer line unit for several clears in Act 4, by which point we can forge Python a strong bow and start training him up for that job. As previously mentioned, Python has a defense anti-benchmark. To be exact, we need him to miss 5 defense level ups before a certain point in the run. Until the end of Act 3, he'll just be a filler unit, helping trade items around. And now we assault Zofia Castle. This map is full of indoor tiles that would be very annoying if you weren't hacking weapons, and we will definitely need the hacked crit to actually kill most of the enemies in time. This is the first map we wanted 9 range on Silk and swap on Tobin for, to help Cliff get to a particular square on turn 1. Grey will deal with a couple of archers in the bottom left. Faye once again takes the rusted shield, which should tip you off as to what she will be doing. This map has two bosses, Slade and Desay, with one leaving the moment the other is killed. Desay is a beefy baron we have no hope of killing at present, especially given his class's heavy armor skill, which halves the damage taken from bows, a skill which will show up more frequently in Acts 4 and 5 to annoy us. Sadly, we cannot get Claire Leather Shield combat on this map. Not without compromising the clear in some way, anyway. Cliff needs to make it to that square on turn 1 so he can kill the soldier who is hard to reach otherwise, while also being in a position where, with favorable enemy reinforcements, he can have a clear path on turn 2 without requiring an extra player phase action up north. Physic and recover both give the same amount of EXP. I just had Faye use Physic to cut her HP lower in case it would end up mattering, but I don't think it would have. Cliff goes Burr with the steel bow, murdering everything that looks at him funny. However, we actually want him to spare Slade and land only one regular hit on him to avoid putting him into heal AI, which we will accomplish through a retroactive weapon edit. We also need Slade to attack Cliff from the left rather than above to ensure his path is clear on turn 2. Cliff has a free player face action to chip someone, and he chips at the Arbor Knight since he can safely do so without putting him in retreat AI. Gray also wants to miss one of his hits on turn 2 to get chip EXP without putting that archer into heal AI. His ensuing level up and lets him cleanly kill the enemy archers without needing crits. We suspend to edit Cliff's steel bow to perfect hit and crit again. Faye is warped in to clean up the remaining enemies there because she needs the EXP more than Cliff. We wanted Cliff's path to stay clear so Faye could use Physic on player phase, and yes, Faye's EXP gain is so tight that scrap with EXP matters. Cliff faces so much combat, he unlocked the Steel Bow's combat art. Not that it'll ever actually be used for anything. He even manages to squeeze in a round of combat against Desai since he moves before Slade, which gives him a little extra chip EXP, and Desai will be taken off the map the moment Slade dies, so that Armonite can still suicide into Cliff. One of the nice things about Shadows of Valentia is that enemies who can't attack player units have their actions postponed until after all enemies who can attack player units take their turn. So it's easier to route the enemies. That concludes Zofia Castle in 2 turns, with Act 1 taking a total of 19 turns. We postponed picking up the treasure in Zofia Castle until Act 3 and instead end Act 1 immediately. I'll see you next time with Act 2.